Before we begin, I want to share something that happened to me, something that changed the very definition of family for me. In my 80th year on this earth, it's a story about loyalty, about love, and about the quiet, devastating power of a final choice. I want you to listen, and then I want you to tell me, what would you have done? My name is June, and my story begins, as so many final chapters do, with a birthday, my 80th. You'd think a milestone like that would be cause for a grand family reunion. You'd think my three children, the ones I devoted my life to raising, would find a few hours in their terribly important schedules to honor the woman who gave them their start. You would think that, but thinking and knowing are two very different things, and I have had a lifetime to know my children. The day started quietly. The house, the same one my late husband Arthur and I bought 50 years ago, felt cavernous. Every ticking clock, every creak of the floorboards seemed to be counting down to a disappointment I knew was coming. Maria, my caregiver, had tried her best to make it festive. She had hung a simple, elegant happy birthday banner in the kitchen and made my favorite lemon ricotta pancakes for breakfast. Maria has been with me for 2 years, ever since a nasty fall made it clear that living entirely alone was no longer a sensible option. In those 2 years, she has become less of an employee and more of a quiet, steady presence in my life, a gentle hum of companionship in a house that had grown far too silent. Around noon, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery. A young man stood there with an ostentatious, almost aggressive bouquet of flowers. It was one of those prearranged monstrosities from a national delivery service, a tight, airless dome of lilies, roses, and some sort of garish blue flower I couldn't identify, all sweating inside a cocoon of cellophane. The lilies were the worst part. They're funereal. Did they not know that? Or did they just not care enough to specify? Maria signed for them and brought the bouquet inside, her face a careful mask of neutrality. The chemical scent of the floral preservative filled the hallway, a cloying, artificial smell that had nothing to do with a real garden. Attached to the plastic fork sticking out of the foam base was a small, cream-colored envelope. My name was printed on it in a crisp, impersonal font. My hands, spotted with age, but still steady, opened the flap. The card was thick, expensive cardstock. On the front was a generic, glitter-dusted, happy 80th. Inside, the printed message read, "Wishing you a wonderful day, filled with joy and happiness," and beneath that, the signatures, or rather the lack of them. First, "All our love, Robert," except it wasn't his handwriting. It was the neat, efficient cursive of a career assistant. I knew this because I recognized it from the Christmas cards he sent. Beneath that, "Thinking of you, Sylvia," in a bubbly, looped script that belonged to the young girl she employed to manage her social calendar. And finally, "Best Thomas," scrawled in a sharp, angular print that was clearly not my youngest son's artistic, chaotic signature. It was signed by their people, not by them. My own children had outsourced their birthday wishes. I stared at the card. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind of calm that comes after a high fever breaks. It wasn't a hot flush of anger. It wasn't a tidal wave of grief. It was a cold, quiet certainty. It was the final brick falling into place in a wall that had been under construction for 20 years. Hurt, yes, deeply, but surprised, not in the slightest. And that, I realized, was the most heartbreaking part of all. Maria was watching me. She didn't say a word, just gently took the vase from my hands and placed it on a side table in the hall, as if it were a piece of evidence at a crime scene. Her silence was more comforting than any platitude could have been. She knew. She saw. I looked past her, through the doorway into the living room, at the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Arthur and me on our wedding day. The three children as toddlers, all chubby cheeks and matching sailor suits. school portraits, graduation photos, a whole lifetime of manufactured happy moments. And in that instant, a decision formed in my mind, not a hot-headed, vengeful one. It was colder than that. It was a decision of profound and absolute clarity. If my biological children were too busy to be my family, then I would celebrate with the family I had left, and I would make sure it was a celebration none of us would ever forget. I turned to Maria, the offending card still in my hand. "Maria," I said, and my voice was stronger than it had been all day. "Forget these. Go and get my good address book, the leather-bound one, and call the caterers, the expensive ones. We're having a party, a real one." The hours that followed that awful flower delivery were a blur of quiet fury and cold resolve. After Maria went to make the first few calls, I found myself in the living room, standing before the mantelpiece. I ran my finger over the dust on a silver frame, holding a picture of Robert, Sylvia, and Thomas from about 15 years ago. They were at some resort, all tanned and smiling, a picture of health and success. Robert, in his crisp polo shirt, already looked like a junior executive. Sylvia had her arm looped through her wealthy husband's, a practiced smile on her face, and Thomas, my youngest, stood slightly apart, affecting an air of artistic detachment that I now recognized as simple self-absorption. They looked like people in a magazine advertisement, not like my children. My mind drifted back. It's funny how a single moment of disrespect can unlock a whole library of past hurts. It wasn't just this birthday. It was a long, slow erosion of connection, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. I sank into Arthur's old armchair, the leather sighing under my weight. He's been gone 5 years now. Arthur was a good man, a wonderful husband, but he was an optimist to a fault, especially about the children. He was the one who built the company, a small but highly successful engineering firm that specialized in custom components for medical equipment. He was brilliant, but humble. The money, when it came, was almost a surprise to him. To the children, it was an expectation, their busy June. He would always say when I'd lament another missed Sunday dinner or a holiday cut short, "Robert's got that big merger. Sylvia's chairing the hospital benefit. Thomas is preparing for a new gallery show." He always had an excuse for them. He saw their ambition as a reflection of his own drive, and he was proud, I think, in his heart. He couldn't bear to see the truth, that their ambition had curdled into a relentless self-interest that left no room for anyone else, not even their own mother. After Arthur passed, the pretense fell away almost entirely. They were there for the funeral, of course, dressed in impeccable black, looking appropriately somber. They played their parts well. Robert gave a eulogy that sounded more like a corporate quarterly report on his father's legacy of success. Sylvia sobbed delicately into a silk handkerchief, her eyes darting around to see who was watching. Thomas read a poem that was more about his own feelings of loss than about the man we had all lost. They were there for the reading of the will. A week later, their grief miraculously abated, replaced by an air of keen anticipation. I remember the lawyer, Mr. Albright, reading Arthur's final wishes. It was simple. He was an old-fashioned man. Everything, the house, the stock portfolio, the savings, the company shares he hadn't sold, it all went to me, his beloved wife of 55 years. There was a clause expressing his sincere hope and expectation that I would provide for our children and eventually pass the estate on to them and their children in a fair and equitable manner. But it was a wish, not a legal requirement. The air in the room grew thick with their disappointment. They had expected trusts to be established in their names, immediate cash disbursements. They had expected to be given their inheritance while I was still breathing. After that day, the calls became even less frequent. It was as if by leaving me in control of the finances, Arthur had made me a gatekeeper. I wasn't just mom anymore. I was a living obstacle to their payday. My mind replayed a highlight reel of their casual cruelties. There was the time, 3 years ago, when Robert called me in a panic. He needed $50,000, a bridge loan, he called it, a can't-miss investment opportunity that had a tight deadline. He promised he'd pay it back, with interest, in 6 months. It's just to secure the position, Mom. It's a sure thing. I was hesitant, but the thought of his father's pride and his business acumen won me over. I made the transfer. 6 months came and went. A year. I never saw a penny. When I finally gathered the courage to ask him about it, he was dismissive. Oh, that? Mom, please. Think of it as an advance. It's all coming to me eventually anyway, right? The casual wave of his hand, the utter lack of gratitude or remorse, stung more than the loss of the money itself. Then there was Sylvia, 2 Christmases ago. She always hosts a lavish party at her palatial home. That year, I hadn't received an invitation. When I called to ask, she was all flustered sympathy. Oh, Mother, I didn't want to bother you with it. It's such a loud, crowded affair. So many people. I was worried it would be too much for you, with your health. I was perfectly healthy at the time. A week later, my friend Eleanor, who is in the same social circle, showed me pictures from the party on her tablet. And there, in the center of a laughing crowd, was Sylvia's husband's aunt, Beatrice. Beatrice was 92, in a wheelchair, and required a full-time nurse. But she was there. I was not. The message was clear. I was an inconvenience, an embarrassment, a story she didn't want to have to tell at her glamorous party. And Thomas, my sensitive artist, last summer, he called, not to ask how I was, but to ask if he and his artist collective could use the lake house for the month of July. We need a retreat, Mom, to get away from the city and really connect with our muse. The lake house was Arthur's sanctuary. It was filled with our memories, but I said yes, because I still held out that foolish hope that a gesture of kindness might be returned in kind. He and his friends went. They left a month later, and when I went up to air the place out, I was horrified. The place was a wreck. Wine stains on the rugs, cigarette burns on the porch railing, and a pile of garbage bags on the back deck that had attracted every animal in a 5-mile radius. It took me and a professional cleaning crew a week to set it right. He never even called to say thank you. When I sent him the bill for the cleaners, a gentle hint, he texted back, a bit steep for a little tidying up. Isn't it? The price of creativity, I guess. Lol. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a tapestry woven from threads of entitlement, selfishness, and a profound, breathtaking neglect. And I had let it happen. I had enabled it, always hoping, always making excuses, just as Arthur had. I was trying to honor his wish that I keep the family together, but I finally realized you can't keep something together that is already broken. You can't hold on to people who have already let you go. That's when Maria came into my life. After my fall, the children had a conference call, without me, of course, and decided I needed a live-in caregiver. They interviewed a few agencies over the phone, picked one, and set it up. It was another task to be checked off their list. Mom's care handled. They never even came to meet her. The first time I saw Maria, she was standing in my doorway with a small suitcase, looking nervous but with kind, intelligent eyes. She was from the Philippines, a trained nurse who came to America to support her family back home. At first I was resentful of her presence. She was a symbol of my own frailty, a daily reminder that my children saw me as a problem to be managed. But Maria was patient. She didn't push. She just did her job with a quiet competence that was impossible to dislike. She learned how I liked my tea. She remembered the names of the characters in the mystery novels I read. She would listen, really listen, when I talked about Arthur. One afternoon, a few months after she started, she was helping me repot some orchids, her small, nimble fingers gently teasing the roots. She started talking about her own family. She told me about her mother, who still lived in a small village, and her younger sister, who she was putting through nursing school with the money she sent home. Her face lit up when she spoke of them. She described their birthdays, not with presents, but with food and music, and the whole neighborhood gathering to share in the celebration. Family to her was not a duty or an obligation, it was a source of joy. It was the very center of her life. Her stories were a mirror, reflecting the stark emptiness of my own situation. Her loyalty to her family, a family she was separated from by thousands of miles through my own children's neglect, from just a few suburbs away, into sharp, painful relief. She showed me more genuine warmth and concern in a few months than my children had in years. She wasn't just my caregiver. She had become my companion, my confidant, my friend. She was the one who was here. And so, sitting there in Arthur's chair, the memory of that soulless flower delivery still fresh, the cold resolve in my heart hardened into a plan. It was a radical plan, a plan that would burn the final bridge to my old life. But it felt right. It felt just. It was about honoring loyalty where I found it, not where biology dictated I should. It wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. It was about legacy. Arthur had entrusted his legacy to me, and I had a duty to see that it went to someone who understood its value, not its monetary value, but the value of a life built on love and hard work. The children had proven they understood nothing. Maria understood everything. The decision was made. The next morning, I would call Mr. Albright. The charade was over. The morning after my sad little birthday, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of hurt and obligation had lifted, replaced by the clean, sharp air of purpose. Maria had already removed the funereal bouquet from the hall. There was no trace of it. A small act, but it felt significant. A clearing of the slate. At 9 o'clock sharp, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Mr. Albright's law firm. His secretary, a pleasant woman named Doris, who had been with him for 40 years, put me right through. June, a belated happy birthday. Mr. Albright's voice boomed through the receiver. He was old school, a gentleman from a bygone era. He had been Arthur's lawyer and friend for decades. I trust you had a pleasant day. It was very illuminating. David, I said, forgoing the usual pleasantries, I need to see you, as soon as possible. It's about my will. And something else. There must have been something in my tone, because he didn't hesitate. My 1:30 is open. Can you come to the office? I'll be there, I said, and hung up. I asked Maria to drive me. During the ride, I was quiet, rehearsing what I would say. This was the first real step, and I needed to be firm. I couldn't let David's caution, which I knew would be abundant, sway me. When we arrived at his stately brick office building, I told Maria I might be a while and that she should go get herself a nice lunch. She looked at me, a question in her eyes, but she simply nodded. Take your time, June. I'll be right around the corner. Her trust in me was a quiet gift. David Albright's office was a sanctuary of dark wood, leather-bound books, and the faint, pleasant smell of pipe tobacco, even though he'd quit smoking years ago. He greeted me with a warm hug, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. He saw the new steel in my spine. All right, June, he said, once we were seated across his enormous mahogany desk. You look like a woman on a mission. What's happened? So I told him everything. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I laid out the facts calmly, dispassionately. The years of neglect, the financial loans, the social snubs. I ended with the story of the flowers and the card signed by assistants. I slid the card across the desk to him. He picked it up, studied the signatures, and placed it back down gently, as if it were contaminated. I see, he said, his voice low. I am truly sorry, June. Arthur would be profoundly disappointed. Arthur was a sentimentalist. I replied. I can no longer afford to be. David, I want to change my will. I want to leave my children $1 each, a symbolic sum, so they cannot claim they were forgotten. He nodded slowly. That is certainly your prerogative. It will undoubtedly be contested, but it's a clear statement. That's the first part, I said, leaning forward. Here's the second. I want to adopt Maria. David blinked. It was the first time in 30 years I had ever seen him truly taken aback. He took off his spectacles and began polishing them with a handkerchief, a sure sign that he was processing something extraordinary. Adopt her? June, you mean legally? An adult adoption? That's exactly what I mean. I said, I want to make her my daughter, in the eyes of the law, and in my heart, and I want to make her the primary heir to my entire estate. He put his glasses back on and stared at me. He was no longer just my lawyer. He was my friend, concerned for my well-being. June, that is a monumental step. Are you certain you've thought this through? The legal ramifications, the family fallout, your children will lose their minds. Let them, I said, and the words felt liberating. Their minds have been lost to greed and ambition for years. It's time they faced a consequence. David, this isn't just about punishing them, it's about rewarding loyalty. Maria has shown me more kindness in 2 years than they have in 2 decades. Family isn't just blood. I believe blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It's time I structured my life to reflect that belief. My use of that old phrase seemed to land with him. He saw this was not a whim. He leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from surprise to strategic consideration. Okay, he said. Okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We need to build a fortress. They will come at us with everything they have. They'll claim undue influence, diminished capacity. They will try to paint you as a senile old woman being manipulated by a clever caregiver. And so, the secret plan began. The next 2 months were a flurry of quiet, methodical activity. David was my general, and his office was our war room. First, he scheduled a full battery of neurological and psychological exams for me with 2 different highly respected specialists. We need an impeccable, recent baseline of your cognitive health, he explained. We need to prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that you are of sound mind and making this decision of your own free will. I went to the appointments. I answered the questions. I did the memory tests. I described my motivations. The reports came back glowing. Sharp as a tack, one of the doctors wrote. Exhibits a clear and logical thought process. David filed them away. They were the first bricks in our fortress. Next, we brought in my financial advisor, a brilliant young woman named Chloe, who I had hired after Arthur's death. She was sharp, no nonsense, and completely unsentimental about money. The 3 of us sat in a conference room for a whole afternoon, going over every single asset. The full value of the stock portfolio Arthur had left was staggering. My own investments had also matured beautifully. The properties, this house, the lake house, had appreciated immensely. Seeing the final number on the spreadsheet was shocking even to me. I had never really thought of myself as wealthy. I was just comfortable, but on paper, I was a very rich woman, and it was all mine. Chloe was direct. June, your children have no legal claim to any of this right now. Arthur's will was airtight. It's all yours to do with as you wish. You could donate it all to a cat sanctuary if you wanted to. I have something better in mind, I said. The most difficult part was talking to Maria. I couldn't just spring this on her. It was a life-altering proposition, and I had to handle it with the care it deserved. I waited for a quiet evening. We were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Maria, I began, my heart pounding a little. I need to talk to you about something serious. She turned to me, her expression open and patient. I told her about my children. I didn't spare the details this time. I told her how they had let me down, time and time again. I told her how much her presence, her simple, decent kindness, had come to mean to me, and then I told her my plan. I have instructed my lawyer, I said, my voice steady, to begin the legal proceedings for me to adopt you as my daughter. She stared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Adopt me. June, I don't understand. Why would you do that? Because you are more of a daughter to me than the ones I gave birth to, I said simply, because I want to give you the security you deserve. I want you to be family, officially, legally, and with that comes everything else, the house, the inheritance, a future for you, for your mother, for your sister, a legacy of kindness, passed on to someone who understands what it means. Tears began to well in her eyes. But people will say I tricked you, that I did this for the money. Your children, I don't care what they say. I interrupted gently but firmly. My friends know the truth. My lawyer knows the truth, and I know the truth. This isn't something you asked for. It's something I am choosing, a gift I want to give. Please, will you accept? She was silent for a long moment, the tears now streaming down her face. She took my hand in both of hers. My own mother, she whispered. She always said that family is a garden. You must water the flowers that bloom. You want to water me. You've been watering me for 2 years, my dear. I said, my own eyes now misty. It's my turn. She nodded, a sob catching in her throat. Yes, June, she said. Yes, I will be your daughter. With Maria's consent, David Albright filed the official paperwork. The process was slow, bureaucratic. There were court filings, background checks, more forms than I could count. And during all this, I maintained a placid silence with my children. They sent their occasional perfunctory texts. Hope you're well, Mom. Thinking of you. I would reply with a simple thank you, dear. All is well here. My lack of demands, my sudden contentment, must have been unnerving. They were so used to me being a low-grade source of guilt, a problem to be managed. My silence was a vacuum, and I knew that sooner or later, their own anxiety would rush in to fill it. The plan was in motion. The trap was being set. All I had to do now was wait for them to walk into it. The plan to adopt Maria and revise my will was a quiet legal maneuver. But as the weeks passed and the paperwork progressed, a new feeling began to take root in my heart. It wasn't enough to simply change a document in a lawyer's office. After decades of being dismissed and ignored, I wanted to be seen. I wanted my choice to be witnessed. The quiet justice of the plan began to feel insufficient. I started to crave a little bit of theater. It wasn't about revenge until suddenly it was. That's when I decided to throw the party. Not just any party, a lavish, no-expense-spared affair to celebrate my new beginning. I would host it in my own garden, the one Arthur and I had cultivated for half a century, the one Maria now helped me tend with such loving care. It would be a celebration of found family, and it would be the stage for my announcement. The first move in this silent takeover was the invitations. I didn't use email or some impersonal online service. I went to the old stationer in town and had them print thick, cream-colored cards with gold embossed lettering. The wording was deliberate. June cordially invites you to a garden party in celebration of family, friendship, and new beginnings. I sent them to everyone who mattered, my steadfast friends from my book club, my boisterous companions from the gardening society, our kind old neighbors, my cousin Carol, who had always seen the truth about my children, and of course, Mr. Albright and his wife. Maria was listed not as a guest, but alongside me as a co-host. I did not send invitations to Robert, Sylvia, or Thomas. It wasn't an oversight. It was a statement. The silence from their end lasted for exactly 9 days. That's how long it took for the news to trickle through the social grapevine and reach them. The first call was from Sylvia. Her voice was a symphony of forced casualness. Mother, darling, I was just talking to Barbara next door to you, and she mentioned you were planning some sort of event, a party. Oh, hello, Sylvia, I said, my voice light and breezy. I was pruning roses with Maria when she called, and I felt a thrill of power. Yes, just a little get-together. The garden is so lovely this time of year. I wanted to share it with a few friends. A few friends. Her voice tightened almost imperceptibly. Barbara made it sound quite grand. She said you've hired the cordon bleu caterers. Well, at my age, dear, there's no point in skimping, is there? I said cheerfully. I know how terribly busy you and the boys are, so I didn't want to trouble you with it. It's really just a local thing. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. My politeness was a fortress she couldn't breach. By framing it as a favor to her, not bothering her with my little life, I had robbed her of her usual weapons of guilt and obligation. Well, she finally stammered, of course we'd want to be there. We'll clear our schedules. Just let me know the date. Oh, Sylvia, don't be silly, I chirped. You have your charity galas, and Robert has his business trips. I wouldn't dream of imposing. It's really no big deal. You just enjoy your summer. I could feel her fury crackling through the phone. I had dismissed her. Me, her mother, the woman she had been dismissing for her entire adult life. The power shift was so new, so total, she didn't know how to react. She mumbled something about calling me back and hung up. An hour later, the second wave arrived. Robert, his approach was different. No false sweetness, just blunt force. Mom, what's going on? He began. Without any preamble, Sylvia's all worked up about some party. She says you're spending a fortune. Is everything all right? Financially? There it was, the immediate reflexive jump to the money. Not, are you okay, Mom? Not, why didn't you tell us? But is the money safe? Everything is perfectly fine, Robert. Thank you for asking, I said, my voice as cool as cucumber soup. I've decided to enjoy some of the money your father and I worked so hard for. I think he would have wanted that. Enjoy it how? He pressed. Is someone advising you on this? This seems out of character. I have excellent advisors, dear, and perhaps my character is due for a little update. Now I have to run. The florist is here. So lovely to hear from you. I hung up before he could respond. The final prong of the attack was a text message from Thomas that evening. It was so perfectly him, a blend of childish pout and wounded artist. Heard a Rav, having a party, feeling left out, thought we were family. I looked at the message on my phone screen. I thought about all the birthdays, holidays, and simple Sunday afternoons. He had felt perfectly fine about me feeling left out. I typed back a single, devastatingly cheerful sentence. Just a small gathering, sweetie. Nothing for you to worry about. Love, Mom. The three of them, for the first time in probably years, started communicating with each other. I could picture the frantic chain of texts and calls. What's gotten into her? Who is she talking to? Why is she being so happy? They were used to me being a predictable source of neediness and quiet disappointment. This new, cheerful, independent version of me was a terrifying unknown. They couldn't control me with guilt if I wasn't asking for anything. They couldn't manage me if I didn't present a problem. My silence, my politeness, my utter self-sufficiency, it was driving them mad. They sensed the ground shifting beneath their feet, the tectonic plates of family power rearranging themselves, and they were desperate to find out why. Their panic was the appetizer, and the main course was yet to be served. The children's panic manifested in a predictable, if clumsy, counteroffensive. They began to realize that their usual leverage, a potent combination of my love for them and their carefully cultivated ability to make me feel guilty, was no longer effective. So they tried to turn my own world against me. They launched an intelligence gathering operation, a pathetic little espionage campaign, to find out what was truly going on. It began with Sylvia. She called my sister Carol, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Aunt Carol, have you spoken to Mother lately? I'm just so worried about her, this big, expensive party. And she's being so secretive. It's not like her. And she has that woman, the caregiver, with her all the time. I just hope she's not being taken advantage of." But my sister Carol is no fool. She's a retired teacher with a PhD in spotting nonsense. She had watched my children's spectacular neglect for years, biting her tongue out of respect for me. That respect, it turned out, did not extend to them. "Sylvia," Carol told me, she said, her voice dry as a bone, "your mother is the sharpest 80-year-old I know. The only person who has ever taken advantage of her is you and your brothers. Perhaps if you'd visited her on her actual birthday, you wouldn't need to get your information secondhand. Have a lovely day." And she hung up. Next, Robert tried to pry information out of my old friend Eleanor, whose husband had served on a corporate board with him once. He invited her for coffee under the guise of catching up. Eleanor, bless her heart, went to the meeting armed for battle. She let him talk for 20 minutes, listening to his circular, leading questions about my state of mind and my recent spending habits. Finally, she put her cup down with a decisive clink. "Robert," she said, looking him dead in the eye, "I've known your mother for 50 years. She is a brilliant, capable woman who has put up with more nonsense from her children than any saint. Whatever she is doing, I am 100% certain she has a damn good reason for it. And you know what? It's none of my business, and it's certainly none of yours." They were hitting brick walls everywhere they turned. The community they had so long ignored, the friends they had never bothered to know, had formed a silent, protective circle around me. They had assumed these people were my keepers, but they were my allies. My children were discovering that they were completely, utterly alone, isolated by their own selfishness. The family they thought they could summon and control at will was not their family at all. It was mine. Their final, desperate countermove was a strategic blunder of epic proportions. Lacking any new information and fueled by a growing sense of panic, they decided on a show of force. They concluded that my strange behavior must be a cry for attention. They convinced themselves that I had orchestrated this whole party just to make them feel bad, and that what I really wanted was for them to show up, profess their love, and restore the natural order of things. They completely misread the situation, seeing it through the distorted lens of their own narcissism. The day of the party, about an hour before guests were scheduled to arrive, my phone rang. It was Sylvia. "Mother," she said, her voice filled with an almost triumphant magnanimity. "We've been talking, Robert, Thomas, and I, and we've decided you're right. We've been too distant. We've let our careers get in the way, so we're coming tonight, all of us. will be there to support you." She said it as if she were bestowing a great and glorious gift upon me. "Sylvia, that's not a good idea," I said calmly. "You weren't invited." "Oh, don't be silly, Mother," she laughed, a brittle, unpleasant sound. "We're family. We don't need an invitation. We'll see you around 7. And she hung up before I could protest further. They were going to crash my party. They were going to walk into my celebration of found family and try to reclaim the thrones they had long ago abdicated. They thought it was a power move, a way to reassert their control. They had no idea they were not the stars of this show. They were merely the final act, the villains walking onto a stage that had been perfectly set for their downfall. I hung up the phone, a small, cold smile on my face. "Let them come," I whispered to the empty room. "Let them witness it all." The evening of the party was perfect. It was one of those magical late summer nights where the air is warm and smells of honeysuckle and cut grass. We had strung fairy lights through the branches of the old oak tree, and they twinkled like captured stars. The caterers had set up elegant white tents in the garden, and a small jazz trio was playing softly on the patio. My friends and neighbors, about 50 of them in all, milled about, laughing and chatting. They were the people who had brought me a casserole after Arthur died, the ones who drove me to doctor's appointments when I couldn't, the ones who stopped by just to see how I was doing. Seeing them all together in my garden, my heart felt fuller than it had in a very long time. I wore a silk dress in a lovely shade of sapphire blue. Maria was by my side, looking radiant in a simple, elegant cream-colored dress I had insisted on buying for her. She was nervous, her hand occasionally fluttering to her throat, but she was also glowing. My friends, who had come to know and love her over the past 2 years, embraced her warmly. She wasn't the help tonight. She was the guest of honor. Mr. Albright arrived with his wife, looking distinguished in a linen suit. He gave me a knowing look and a firm squeeze of the hand. "The stage is set, June," he murmured. "Are you ready?" "I've been ready for 20 years, David," I said. At precisely 7:15, a palpable shift occurred. The gentle hum of conversation faltered. A hush fell over the garden as heads turned toward the entrance to the patio. And there they were, my 3 children, striding into the party as if they owned the place. They were a united front of tailored ambition. Robert in a severe dark suit that was completely inappropriate for a garden party. Sylvia in a sharp architectural cocktail dress that screamed, "Look at me." Thomas in a black turtleneck and blazer, the classic uniform of someone who desperately wants to be taken seriously. They looked like they were about to foreclose on an orphanage. Sylvia, ever the public relations expert, had a brilliant false smile plastered on her face. She spotted me across the lawn and began to advance, her brothers trailing like well-dressed stormtroopers. "Mother," she called out, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "We came to surprise you. Happy birthday, darling." She moved to embrace me, to create a public tableau of familial devotion. But I took a small step back, just out of her reach. I picked up the small microphone that the jazz trio had set up for announcements. The hum of the amplifier silenced the remaining whispers. Every eye was on me. I looked out at the faces of my friends, my true family, and then my gaze settled on my children. "Thank you all so much for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady, amplified throughout the garden. "It means the world to me to have you here tonight to celebrate with my found family." I put a deliberate emphasis on those 2 words. I've learned recently that family isn't always about the circumstances of your birth. Sometimes it's about the choices you make. It's about who shows up. It's about who is loyal. It's about who gives kindness without expecting anything in return. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. My children's smiles were beginning to look strained. "For my 80th birthday," I continued, a milestone my biological children were sadly too busy with their important lives to acknowledge in any meaningful way. I received the greatest gift of all. It was the gift of clarity. I turned and put my arm around Maria, who was standing beside me, her eyes wide. I drew her forward into the soft glow of the patio lights. Life has a funny way of giving you the family you need, even if it's not the one you started with. So tonight, I have a very special announcement. I want to introduce you all to the newest and most cherished member of my family. I looked directly at Robert, Sylvia, and Thomas. Their faces were masks of confusion and dawning horror. With the full counsel and assistance of my lawyer, Mr. David Albright, who is here with us tonight, I have completed the legal process of adult adoption. Please join me in welcoming my new, legally recognized daughter, Maria. I raised my glass to her. Welcome to the family, Maria. And as my beloved daughter, you will, of course, be the primary heir to the entire estate that my late husband Arthur and I built together. For a moment, there was absolute stunned silence. You could have heard a petal drop from a rose bush. The jazz trio had stopped playing. My children stood frozen, their mouths slightly agape. The color had drained from their faces, leaving behind a pasty mixture of disbelief, fury, and pure, unadulterated panic. Then my old friend Eleanor started to clap. It was a slow, deliberate sound. Then my cousin Carol joined in. Soon the entire party erupted in a wave of thunderous applause. It wasn't just for me. It was for Maria. It was for the idea of it all. It was a standing ovation for justice. Sylvia was the first to break. The mask of her smile didn't just crack, it shattered into a million pieces, revealing the ugly, snarling entitlement beneath. "You can't be serious," she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "This is insane. You're insane. She's the help." The word help echoed in the sudden quiet that followed her outburst. It was so crass, so demeaning. Maria flinched as if she'd been struck. I tightened my arm around her shoulder, holding her steady. I looked at Sylvia, not with the anger she expected, but with a profound and weary pity. "She is my daughter," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "She was here. You were not. It's really that simple, Sylvia." Robert, recovering from his shock, stepped forward, his face a thundercloud. "This won't stand," he seethed, all corporate aggression. "This is illegal. You're clearly not competent to make these decisions. She's manipulated you. We'll fight this. We'll see you in court." I didn't even have to say a word. I simply nodded toward Mr. Albright. David stepped forward, calm and implacable. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out 3 business cards. He advanced on Robert and held one out. "Feel free to have your legal counsel contact me at their earliest convenience," David said, his voice carrying the immense weight of the law. "You will find my client's recent and multiple competency evaluations to be impeccable. We also have a rather extensive file documenting years of correspondence, or the lack thereof, which I'm sure any judge would find most illuminating." Robert stared at the card as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't take it. Thomas, looking pale and lost, just kept muttering, "I don't understand. I don't understand." Sylvia was trembling with a rage, so pure it was almost impressive. They stood there, the 3 of them, powerful, wealthy, and utterly defeated, in the middle of a party that was a monument to their own failure. They had come to reclaim their kingdom, only to find the locks had been changed and a new queen had been crowned, and they had no one to blame but themselves. After the confrontation, the air in the garden seemed to change. The tension broke, replaced by an even greater sense of warmth and celebration. My 3 children, after a moment of sputtering, impotent fury, turned and fled. They didn't say goodbye. They just vanished into the darkness, leaving the sound of laughter and jazz behind them. The party, my real party, went on long into the night, more joyful than I could have ever imagined. As predicted, they did fight it. Oh, how they fought. They pooled their considerable resources and hired a team of expensive pit bull lawyers. They filed a petition to have the adoption annulled and my will invalidated. Their claim was exactly what Mr. Albright had predicted, that I, their poor dear senile mother, had been the victim of undue influence by a predatory caregiver. They tried to paint Maria as a scheming opportunist and me as a doddering old fool. But David Albright had built our fortress out of stone. The legal battle was short and brutal. Their lawyers were aggressive, but David was prepared. He presented the medical evaluations, a mountain of them, all attesting to my sharp mind and clear will. He presented sworn affidavits from my friends, my neighbors, even from my sister Carol, all detailing the long and painful history of my children's neglect. He presented phone records, emails, and text messages, a vast and damning collection of silence and selfish requests. The contrast between their perfunctory, rare communications and Maria's daily record of care and companionship was stark. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her late 60s, listened to it all with a stony expression. The final nail in their coffin was when their own lawyer put me on the stand, hoping to trip me up, to make me seem confused. It was a grave miscalculation. I answered every question with precision and clarity. "They say you were manipulated," the lawyer said, his tone condescending. "I was manipulated for 50 years," I replied, looking directly at the judge. "I was manipulated by my own hope that my children would one day become the people I raised them to be. The only thing Maria did was treat me with the kindness and respect that a parent should be able to expect from their child. My decision wasn't the result of her influence. It was the result of their absence." The case was dismissed. They lost. They lost the inheritance. They lost their legal fees, but they lost something far more important. They lost their story. Their carefully constructed image as devoted children of a successful family was shattered, laid bare for the courts and their social circles to see. The truth, in the end, was a far more powerful weapon than their money. My life now is peaceful. On the surface, not much has changed. I still live in my house. I still work in my garden. But the gnawing ache of loneliness, the constant, low-grade pain of being taken for granted, is gone. It has been replaced by a quiet contentment. Maria is with me, no longer just a caregiver, but my daughter in every sense that matters. We make decisions together. We laugh together. We care for each other. Last spring, we used some of the money from the sale of the lake house, a property my children always viewed as their future playground, to fly her mother here from the Philippines for a long visit. Watching Maria with her own mother, seeing their easy affection and deep, unconditional love, healed a part of my heart I thought would be broken forever. We also established a foundation in her home village, a scholarship fund to help other young women become nurses just like her. A real legacy, not a monument to wealth, but a garden of opportunity. It turns out that building something is infinitely more satisfying than holding on to something. It was never really about the money. It was about respect. It was about seeing and being seen. My children looked at me and saw a bank vault with a fading heartbeat. Maria looked at me and saw a person. It really is that simple. So now I turn to you. I've told you my story, and I have to ask, did I go too far? Was it a cruel and vengeful act, or was it the ultimate act of self-respect? They say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that water, given daily, with love and attention, can grow a garden in the most barren of lands, while blood left to its own devices can simply run dry. Family, I've decided, isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. It's a choice you make every single day. And sometimes the most loving choice you can make is to finally stop choosing the people who never ever chose you. Thank you for listening. If my story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about your family, the one you were given and the one you have chosen. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. It's important we remind each other that it is never, ever too late to claim the life you deserve.